making work from home the new normal. While we eventually will return to many of the activities that we left behind, the impact on our work lives is likely to remain at some level. And so tonight I invited 3 guests from the industry to discuss their experiences and the future of work. And so as many of you prepare to enter the workforce, I hope that their insights and experience will help you in your own journey. So I want to start out by introducing our panelists and and telling you a little bit about them from their bios. And first we have Matthew Prell. He's Vice President of Human Resources for the Golden Touch and Jaclyn groups. And Matt is, this is his current position, and it's a group of apparel companies which specializes primarily in mass market retail. And over the last 20 years, Matt has worked for several large companies, including Mars, Inc., Bed Bath & Beyond, Accenture, and Kraft Foods. He received his bachelor's degree from William Patterson University and his master's in human resources management from Cornell's Industrial and Labor Relations School. Additionally, over the years, Matt has presented on the future of the world of work at several conferences and has taught organizational behavior at Columbia University. Our next panelist is Esther Murray. Esther Murray is a principal administrative associate with over 22 years of experience working in various capacities at the New York City Department of Finance. Esther is a troubleshooter for the Department of Finance who builds relationships at all organizational levels of the agency. She spearheaded the creation of a standardized payment protocol, which is employed at all city and state, city and state agencies to facilitate effective revenue collection. She led a team effort in 2016 to bring 500 million in, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time seeing this, to bring 500 million in the 2016 in revenue in the 2016 tax amnesty program. She's a leading collector of delinquent taxes and penalties owed to the city of New York. Esther graduated from FIT in 2012, magna cum laude. Her passion for higher education landed a master's degree in international affairs from NYU in 2015 and a master's at the CUNY School of Labor and Urban Studies in 2019. During the pandemic, while working from home, Esther utilized her downtime to become certified as a career coach. She is the go-to person in her unit for assisting upper management in conflict resolution and mentors team members who seek her advice in overcoming career challenges. And then finally, we have Victoria Selig, and she is a 2020 cum laude graduate from the Fashion Institute of Technology, earning her BS in International Trade and Marketing with minors in Economics, Sustainability, and Italian language. Due to her studies of logistics at FIT and her internship experience within the inbound logistics department at an intimate apparel wholesaler, Dreamwear Inc., both educational areas assisted in making Victoria an excellent candidate for her current role at Mallory Alexander International Logistics. Here, Victoria takes the skills learned from ITM and puts them to great use in her business development role at this freight forwarding company. Daily, she works with clients and their shipping needs that incorporate carriers, containers, and compliance, the trilogy of shipment Cs. She believes patience is a crucial and driving force in landing your first job, especially now in 2021. Things will happen when you least expect them to, is proven for her as she got her current role in the midst of the pandemic, as so many others were losing theirs. Victoria owes her success thus far to her exceptional, innovative, and rewarding time at FIT, and hopes current students have the same takeaway from this university as she did in their own professional endeavors. Okay, so welcome to all of our panelists. So I want to start off tonight. I have a series. I want to just do a little housekeeping here. I'm going to ask our panelists a rotating series of questions. And if you have questions for them while you're listening to them and their responses, what I would ask that you do is you can write them in the Q&A chat box. There will be a party that is overseeing, and we will answer your read your questions out loud and ask them of the panelists. So you can either direct your questions to an individual or to all of them as a whole, and we'll take them at the end of the session. Okay. So I want to start off with Matt. And so as the head of human resources, my first question for you was, how easy or difficult was it to move the entire company to a work from home model? And what do you attribute the ease or difficulty of the transition to?
Thanks, Sonia. So I would say that it wasn't necessarily easy to do. It was something we actually started planning in January of last year. I was new to the organization, and one of the gaps I found in my first 90 days was that we didn't have a business continuity plan in place. So we began implementing a business continuity plan in case there's something like a pandemic or a natural disaster where we were going to have to be home for, a week or 2 weeks, identifying what are the critical roles to keep the business moving forward. And just by going through that process, it actually made the transition much easier. So what we learned was that we had all the tools that we needed to do it. We just hadn't told anybody how to log in from home before. So 90% of the workforce at Golden Touch had never worked from home before. So that was probably the biggest challenge for us, was educating people. And we actually started by saying, half the organization would be home on Monday, the other half on Tuesday. And we'd actually planned to do that for a couple weeks when the shutdown came, and we only had one day of each group being at home, Monday and Tuesday. Tuesday the 17th, that was it. But just those 2 days were actually enough for IT to keep up and catch up to all the technical difficulties people were having working remotely, and help us to really adapt quickly. So it was definitely a challenge, not easy, but I would say from my perspective, the other things were, making sure that people knew how to work from home, talking about what skills and other things and different ways to engage teams remotely.
Okay, and the next thing I'd like to ask you is, so what would you say are the primary challenges of the work from home model for you, and then for, would you say are for employees? What are the frustrations? We know that everyone we know that people like the fact that they don't have to commute, but what are the frustrations of this model? What do we lose in it?
Yeah, so I would say that keeping everybody engaged. So you'll find working from home, you end up working longer hours often because you're working through that commuting time. And you also feel like you're always on call. But keeping people engaged mentally and emotionally in the job and the work that they're doing, that connection that you lose from not being face-to-face in the office all the time is probably one of the biggest challenges that people face. And you've probably heard it through the pandemic, a lot of, news stations and other things talking about mental health of employees and the well-being of just all Americans because they've been stuck at home and isolated. And that's a real concern when you're talking about the workplace too. We encourage our leaders to have team meetings on a daily basis, right? Bring people together, have the video calls. Almost all of our interactions have been over video over the last year. I could probably count on my two hands how many phone calls I've had versus video. So yeah, I would say that that's definitely the biggest challenge is engaging associates and keeping them mentally fresh.
To Esther, and I wanted to say, ask you, as an administrator who's deeply involved in training, how difficult has it been to pivot to effectively training staff from home? And I'm going to ask you the second part of this question at the same time, and and let it because it it really is a combined question. And was the city technologically ready for this challenge? Have your trainees taken longer to adapt? I'd like to kind of hear about that part.
Okay, thank you for that question, Sonia, and thanks everyone for being here today. The pandemic really had accelerated the changes in what the distance working and learning can look like, given how quickly it happened. Nonetheless, it is still taking time for people and organizations to adjust. The lack of the face-to-face interaction has really been an issue, as the supervisors are relying or were relying upon the workplace encounters as a means of tracking productivity and dedication. Managers today, they are really now looking for ways to build meaningful communication between themselves and us, the staff. So we do have like scheduled meetings just to catch up, and phone calls, as well as sometimes there's sessions where they would coach us one-to-one so that they can understand what the team members' challenges really are in more detail. There is also, the constant struggle between work and home breaks that interrupt concentration levels and cut down some of the productivity. For example, some of us are working from home, but if you have kids, that's sort of like kind of complicate things a bit, because there's always someone who's like vying for some form of attention. As far as like, was the city ready for this challenge? The city was not ready for this challenge at all, because as a matter of fact, many organizations were not, both private and public sectors were not prepared, because we in the city, we had to, from tech support, they had to add additional hardware within the infrastructure throughout the pandemic, and the hardware, such as like laptops, they were very difficult to find due to the demand. Employees, I presume, they took a longer time to adapt than the private sector, because we at the city, we do not have a work from home policy or flexible schedule. So training was not adequately provided because it happened so quickly. I think it took about 4 to 6 weeks, if I have to estimate the time frame for us to kind of like adjust and adapt to our new normal, if you want to say it that way.
Victoria, this question here. So I actually, because Victoria, I think it's interesting because Matt and Esther have been talking about, the transition and that people meeting with teams. And I think that there's a different experience of someone working from home who knows the whole team that they're working with versus someone who, like you, moves into a new position, and and now you're starting to to meet your coworkers online. So I'd like to hear number one, a little bit about that experience, but what I really wanted you to kind of talk to is, because we have so many people who are about to graduate, was I wanted you to start out by telling us about the transition you experienced in the first few weeks of lockdown, and then how you pivoted to kind of overcome, what was a great deal of disappointment and loss. So if you could share with us.
So, hi everyone. As Professor Chapman said, I'm Victoria. I graduated from the ITM department in 2020. So, like many of you in this chat right now, I was in your position last year, and I'm sure you're feeling kind of overwhelmed, saddened, feeling struggles, but I'm a living, breathing proof that you can get out alive and there is hope at the end of the tunnel. So as Sonia was saying, Professor Chapman was saying, I did end up getting a job through her actually and through the mentorship program at FIT, which I will touch upon in a moment. But the transition was very difficult. I'm going to be completely honest. It was not easy at all to think, you know, I'm going to have a graduation, I'm going to walk across the stage, and I had a different job lines up at the time, and I'm going to live in Manhattan, and it's going to be all these spectacular things that I thought the last 4 years was going to give me. So it definitely was a very difficult transition, and I can remember my graduation sitting in my backyard with my mom, dad, and grandma. It wasn't, you know, as spectacular as I assumed it would be, but nevertheless, I still did it, as will all of you. So the transition was difficult. You know, one day I remember sitting on campus and they said, all right, we're going to take a week off of school. We're not really sure what we're doing yet, but we're going to have a week off. And then that week ended and it was, okay, well, we're doing all remote. And then that turned into, okay, you have to move out of the dorm. So it was a very, very trying time and a hard transition. But once summer came, I said, I need to do something here. I'm a college grad from FIT. I mean, not many people can say that, and it's a huge honor and accomplishment. What is my next step? So I actually reached out to Professor Chapman, and I explained to her my situation and how I'm looking for a job and what can I do and where do you see the market going? And that idea was actually given to me from my mentor, who I'm still very close to this day and who I found through the ITM mentorship program. So for maybe juniors that are going into their senior year, I'd highly recommend that. If you're a senior, I still think maybe getting a mentor or talking to your professors even after graduation is really important. So although the transition was difficult, you know, I enjoyed myself over the summer, but I still buckled down and asked those important questions to people like Professor Chapman who could help me. And that ultimately landed me my current role. So at my current role, I've never met a coworker. This is exactly where I sit every single day. You can see my calendar. I have random stuff behind me that I would have had in a normal office. I'm actually on my work computer right now. So I sit here 8 hours a day. But as great as it is, it's also pretty sad because I never met my coworkers. So I have no idea what shoes they like to wear, what their nail polish color is, or what they eat for lunch. I have not a clue. So there is that lack of friendship there in a sense, because you don't know things about them that you would have known in an office. However, you work through that as well, and you get to know them on a different way. I know my coworkers' dogs bark like the back of my hand now. So, I mean, you just learn different things about these people that you may not have known in the office. So as sad as it is, it's also rewarding in its own sense. So either way, I'm grateful I have a job. So
Thank you.
Yeah.
Matt, I want to go back to you, and I want to ask you, so we typically, in our prior lives, if we were looking at a job, the expectation was that we would go through a series of in-person interviews, and that's how we would land jobs. You know, and maybe there'd be a preliminary phone interview to get a sense if you were a real match for a job or if the interest was there, but primarily, we expected that we were going to meet people. So I wanted to ask you, what are the differences in the interview process for new employees during this time? And what tips can you give to students going on Zoom interviews? And tell us some stories. I know you've got some funny stories.
Sure. So I would say that the biggest difference is that 100% of the interview process for us right now is virtual, right? So we may even skip the old-fashioned phone interview because who uses a phone anymore? It's all through video. So I would say 80-90% of the time we're skipping that first phone interview step and jumping right to a Zoom call. And we do the interviews that way. And I would say that one of the strangest parts, I think, both for the hiring manager and for the person interviewing, is you don't get to meet like in person. You don't get to see, my boss is, 6'2" or,
Mm.
4'11", right? So you don't really know. You get to see from, here up. So it's a little bit strange. And I would say even going into the office on and off as I have, I've met a few new people that have joined our organization, and I've looked at them and said, wow, I didn't like mentally, I'm like, I didn't realize you were so tall or you were so short or whatever, right? It's very different meeting somebody in person. Um, Not that you'd make a different decision, but it's just you get a different feel, right? Um, People tend to talk with their hands, but sometimes you don't see the hands when you're on a Zoom call because you're here up. Um, as far as tips for a Zoom interview, one thing I would say is, you know, you want to make sure that you're looking at the camera. Um, you know, don't have the picture on another screen and be looking off to the side. You want to try and make eye contact as best as possible, and the best way to do that is to look at the camera. Um, Things that I never really thought about before, but are important for this type of environment. Also, you want to, and I am definitely guilty of this, I tend to have the camera, from like chin up because I want to hide all the extra chins that I have. But you you really want to have it a little bit lower because often there are controls at the bottom of the screen and people, it'll hide part of your face essentially. So those are just a few tips. I would also say, you know, try to tell stories. I think for anyone, whether you're an introvert or not, I think tell stories to help engage the person on the other end. You're not face to face, so there are nuances and things. Like right now, I'm talking with my hands and you can't even see it. So, you know, there are mannerisms and physical things that people aren't going to be able to see. So the better you are and more engaging you are with storytelling, the more likely they are to be engaged in the conversation and to want to make you an offer. So, so you asked for stories. So I have a couple of them. We had one gentleman that we were interviewing, and the interview was going well. He stood up to go grab something, and and everybody saw that he's in his gym shorts, right? So not totally inappropriate, but not necessarily appropriate for an interview. Um, I'm sure he assumed we were only going to see from here up, but he had to go and grab something, and so we saw him in his gym shorts. And then we had another interview where I swear it looked like the woman was in a prison cell. She was backed up into the corner of the room. There was a door closed right behind her. The walls were completely white. Um, Not that there's anything wrong with the background, but to be honest, if that were my background, I probably would put on like a picture or something else like as your background so that it's a little bit less odd, I would say. The cement walls and things were a little bit strange to have in the background there. Did I answer all of your questions, or were you looking for a little bit more on anything
No,
there?
no, you did
Okay.
great with that. So I did, I do have, I do have a, follow-up question to this. I was going to say, in the past, a new student might have brought a portfolio of work, maybe some type of project work to kind of demonstrate maybe some kind of analysis that they might have done, or presentations that they might have done, or, obviously in the design area, it's a bit different. You get some actual work. So what do you ask for now to replace that? Or do you, or are you just going on their ability to verbalize what they've done?
So I would say it's different depending on which role someone's applying for. We have had a couple of different roles do small projects that may take them an hour or 2 hours to put together a couple of slides and present them to us to, really show us what they can do.
Mhm.
Most frequently that's in the design or graphic design space. But we have done that in other areas as well. It's tough. To engage with somebody remotely, you know, and especially somebody who's fresh out of school, you want to make sure that that person, especially if they're going to be working remote, is a go-getter. They're going to try and figure things out for themselves. They're, you know, when you're not sitting right next to someone, it's much harder to ask a question, or 30 questions a day, right? Where you'd be able to train and get up to speed much more quickly. You A lot of that ends up on the shoulders of the new person who's starting. Um, and to recognize that, understand it, and be able to figure things out for yourself is going to be really important. And try to convey that during the during the meeting, right? Show that you've done your research on the company, that you went around and searched different places. Tell them, say, I went and I looked at Glassdoor. I went and I, checked out your profile on LinkedIn. And I see that you did this or that, and ask the interviewer questions about themselves. Um, People like to talk about themselves, so always turn it around on them a little bit too, and ask them to, something about their history, or how did they get started.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, Esther, I wanted to ask you, what does the future of, working within, I'd like the contrast here because Matt's in private and you're obviously in public service here. So I wanted to know, what do you think the future of your workplace will look like? Will work from home become a permanent part of the landscape? Do you foresee that? Because as you said previously, you didn't have it. I think you're on mute. Esther, I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry. In the private sector, I know that there are reports and articles being written that the landscape will be changing for a more hybrid model. With that said, people I know are thinking of changing their careers altogether. But as for us here in the public sector, I have not heard much in that area. I do not know about work from home becoming a permanent part of the work landscape, but I do hope that the city applies this hybrid model going forward, because working from home, it offers us a form of flexibility and some benefits so we can balance our work and life, in certain situations. There are reports of like workers working long hours and not taking breaks. So it's important for us to have a balance of the two. But we have not been given any word or heads up that they are working towards that, or they're leading towards that area. I am at home right now when I work, but will that be something that they consider in the future? Left to be seen.
Well, it's interesting because I think that they may, that may be a demand that's put on employment places. I'm going to flip back to Matt for 1 second and ask him, what do you see as the future of office work? Do you see work from home incorporated into most jobs going forward? Work from home was a very desirable accommodation or a perk that you were able, to negotiate prior to COVID, where, you were seen as very lucky if you could manage a day or two where you didn't have to come in. And there was a recent survey that I read off of Live Career, as it was reported in USA Today, noted that 30% of employees do not want to return to their offices and would be willing to find other jobs if required to do so.
Yeah, so great question. And I think to some of the things you just said, I think we mentioned in my bio before that I presented on the future world of work. So I've presented on that topic for the last 5 years prior to the pandemic. And one of the conversations we always end up having in those sessions is around it's around remote workforce, right? And it's also around the gig economy and people coming in and freelancing and doing a specific job and then going on to their next gig. And I think I see that all happening so much more frequently in this new environment, in the new world. We're seeing it in our business already. We've had so many people who've said, you know what, I'm not staying in the city. We don't know when this pandemic's going to be over. And 6 months ago, they moved out of the city to save on rent or whatever. We've had people move to North Carolina, to Texas, to California, and we've continued to let them work. We've told them, of course, you know, it works for us for now until it doesn't work anymore. But reality is, as long as they're doing their jobs, it's going to continue working for us. So, you know, we are even, you know, specific roles like graphic designer, for instance, we're saying, you know, a graphic designer, we don't need them in the office. They can be anywhere. So why do we need to force somebody to come into New York City if we can hire somebody for the same price or less out in Columbus, Ohio? Why don't we do that? And so we're even hiring people who are 100% remote at this point. As we plan to go back to the office, we're planning on 2 days a week. You know, and associates can be there any 2 days between Monday and Thursday, and Friday's a work from home day for everybody. You know, and I think that's going to be more the future than seeing everybody in the office 4 or 5 days a week even. I really don't see anyone going back to that, not anytime soon at least.
Oh, great.
Sonia, can I add to what
Yes, please. Yes,
right.
please.
Well, I can say, like, right now, if you listen to Mayor de Blasio, he is emphasizing that city workers get back to the office. We started this week. Some of us have. I have an underlying condition that keeps me at home, but there was a fight to have me stay at home because, you know, city policies and et cetera, it's not as, the city is not as loose as most corporate companies. So they're staggering some employees back to work. This week you work 1 day, next week you probably work another day, and then following that you're going to be working 3, 4 until eventually you're going to go back. He has not come out and say that we are going to have a hybrid model. We have been given access because we had to get a doctor's note showing that we have a symptom that prevents us from being in an atmosphere that is closed. So this is not something that he's talking about right now. Hence the reason I mentioned that, you know, some people are actually looking to change their careers altogether because, yeah, it's easier for us to work at home because you have the flexibility, right? But he feels that it's better because he thinks that employees work better when they're in an office environment because you lose the face-to-face interaction, and he feels that that helps with productivity. But I tend to differ with that. I just feel that you are able to produce more when you're at home, because when you're working around the clock in an office, you sort of like forget that you're actually eating lunch because someone is going to come and bring you an assignment to do, and that rides over your lunch. So I really do, you know, don't agree with him with that, but that's where we are at right now with the city.
Thank you. So Victoria, I want to switch over to you, and I want to say this. So as someone who is in the work from home environment now, you know, ultimately you landed a position. So what was the training for a new job like under these circumstances? Did you feel supported? Was it more of you should do this and then you had to figure it all out on your own? Did they have to give you materials? How did this all work out for you?
Sure. So I was given a laptop and a PC as just a monitor from my boss. I had to go pick it up at Best Buy because I didn't go to any office to pick it up. So he ordered it. I picked it up at Best Buy. And as far as training, it was all over phone call. And to Matt's point earlier, he was saying, you know, a lot of them were Zoom calls. Well, my meetings are through phone. So I really never see my coworkers because one of them says she doesn't like how she looks on camera. The other one has the dog and her kids. So a lot of our calls, we don't see each other, which made my training a little bit more difficult because I'm a very type A personality. I like to talk and see you and I talk with my hands and I have a little bit of personality. So I was looking forward to training and actually seeing my coworkers, but to make everyone comfortable, they didn't want to do that. And my training was very hard to say the least. It was not an easy adjustment because I only ever knew an office job prior to my spot now. So when I was in my internship at a company for 2 years, I learned hands-on, and I would walk up to my boss and say, hey, can you show me how to do this? I don't know how to do it. Now it was, hi, so I know you don't really know me and I don't really know you, and I'm struggling with something. Can you schedule a call with me? And it just postponed everything in terms of learning because I had to schedule that call and I had to schedule a set time. And although it was difficult, I still now know everything like the back of my hand. And it just took longer, I think, than maybe in-person training because you can just go up to somebody's desk, like I said, and ask them a question, where here I had to really schedule that time. But you learn and you kind of just navigate through it and you understand their personalities, even not seeing their faces for coworkers or bosses. So it's very interesting, very interesting.
I'd like to follow that up with, since you did mention you worked in an office position and in a remote position, and yours is really remote, you know, most of us can do at least see each other in some kind of visual way.
Yeah.
So you don't even know if they're real, right?
Right.
So I wanted to ask you, so you worked in both positions. What do you like and what do you dislike about each?
I don't like working from home. I think my perspective, as aside from the other people on this panel, is a bit different because I'm just entering the workforce. I've never had a job prior to this, full-time job, I should say. You know, I worked at my local mall and I've had my internship, but this is my first full-time position. So to not have that, I have to get up in the morning, I have to get on the train, I need to walk to work, and to not have that socialization at such a young age, I think is a fault of working from home. I personally don't like it. I don't like sitting in this room all day. I don't like talking on the phone. I want to see you, hang out, go up to your desk, comment on your nail color, see how tall you are. I would prefer to work that way. However, there are perks to working at home that don't like get out of the store. I take my dog out. I'll go to my grandma's house. So you do have that flexibility to do things around here. I only have an hour. I know I seem like I do a lot in that hour, but I make use of it. But that's a huge perk is you can do those things. You can get stuff done around the house. You can see people. You can, you know, be with your family a little bit more. Maybe hang out with your dog a little bit more. I mean, there are perks in that sense, but I think the pros and cons, there's pros and cons of each. So it's hard to really say which is better or which is worse. But I think as a young person, having that interaction and being in New York City and working in New York City and living in New York City is an invaluable experience. And I hope that soon we'll have either that hybrid model, as Esther mentioned, or fully back in person. I don't know what will happen, but I'm hopeful that one day I'll be in an office.
Good. Like that. Okay, I want to circle back, you know, I want to circle back now to Matt and ask you, so what skills do you think are important to build in order to thrive in this new environment, right? So we're going to, you know, you'll have, ultimately, we probably will see each other again on a regular basis, but not with the same intensity that we have before. So what do you think, you know, is really for, as people, you know, coming into the workforce, you know, what are the skills that they have to develop now to make sure that they can, you know, that they can not only develop, but advance, because it's, you know, when you're in an office, maybe it's a little bit easier for people to understand your work ethic and, you know, to promote yourself a little bit in a different way. So I'm kind of curious as to, you know, what do you see would be, you know, the people who are thriving this last year, what are they doing?
Yeah, I would say that there are probably a couple of different things. One is, I mentioned before, the ability to work more independently or autonomously. That's definitely critical right now. But I would also say that presentation skills, while always important, is even more important right now. And I don't necessarily mean presentation skills as in I'm giving a formal presentation and, you know, presenting to leaders, but anytime you're in a call or you're in a meeting with somebody, you're presenting to them, right? You're presenting your ideas. So your ability to capture things, whether it's in written form or verbally, in a way that is succinct and able to be comprehended and digested quickly by the people on the other end, that's going to be really important to advancement and thriving in this environment. So communication skills is probably better.
Wow, what are the technicians going to do? I actually, and I kind of like to pose the same question to Esther. What do you feel are the most important for those going into, you know, to kind of work in the city at this time? You know, should you not, you know, go back to 100%?
Well, for me, I would think like a growth mindset is essential as a first step for anyone wishing to build his or her abilities over time. You know, because one's experience, and good or bad, can be like a springboard to learn about oneself and craft a better approach to achieving any goals per se. That type of mindset sort of like shine through whether you're able to substitute a word learning from failing. Coming into this environment in the city, you have to have a bit of tact and diplomacy. You have to be willing and able to work both independently and with a team. You have to be a good communicator, as Matt just said, both orally and in writing. You got to be positive and uplifting, you know, having a bit of resiliency no matter what is thrown at you. Sometimes we're in a case, we got to stop what we're doing and go off because management asks us to do something. It's top priority. So you have to really be able to balance, you know, when someone says for you to change what you're doing right now, you have to be able to adjust and adapt quickly because it's sort of like high volume what we do. Be inventive, always learning, always growing, making yourself more marketable. I do believe that when you hold on to certain technical and transferable skills, that sort of like make you stand out from everyone else. So yeah, being able to have a bit of both technical and transferable skills is great. And be a good communicator. You have to communicate well.
Thank you. Victoria, what skills do you think are most important for you to be effective in the position you have now? And have you improved these over the course of the last year? Or did you already possess them and you had to improve other skills to support your position?
So I hate to say this because I remember when I was a student, I would hate when people bring up the word Excel. But it is, I hate that word. I even hate hearing it at work sometimes, but it is so crucial to my day-to-day job. Not only am I working on spreadsheets, but even on our, I'm sure if you guys have heard of Salesforce, it's a database for clients, prospects, leads. I particularly work with that a lot in my current position. So I will have to extract data from that, and the data then is put into an Excel sheet. But even when I don't want to work with Excel, I still somehow am in Excel. So I highly recommend getting familiarized with Excel, and not even just Excel. Now that people are working from home and communication is through Microsoft Teams or through Outlook, the email platform, I would try to get familiarized with Microsoft 365 as a whole, because half my job is sending emails. People I email, I've never even seen. I never heard their voice. I don't know what they look like. So the only form of communication I have with them is through email. So to the points of the other panelists, that communication is really important. But to save yourself time and to be a little bit more efficient, I don't think it can hurt to understand the technology behind that platform. Really navigate well through it. That way you can be more proficient in terms of getting things done for 9 to 5 every day, what I need to do type of agenda. So I definitely was not good at Excel in college, and I'm really still not that good at it, but I'm learning and I'm getting better. And the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So kind of similar to what I said in my little blurb at the beginning, patience. You know, you want to be a whiz at it as soon as you get into work, and you want to show off all these cool things you know how to do. But my coworkers blow me away at what they could do in Excel because they've been doing it for years. So it takes time, but definitely that would be my advice to becoming graduates and students, is really learning that Microsoft 365 as a whole.
Okay, so to just jump off, I do want to say to the students that are watching the presentation that you have access to LinkedIn Learning through Blackboard at FIT, and LinkedIn Learning does a lot of small segment education on Excel and, you know, different uses of it in Excel. So if you do want to build up those skills, you know, you can look at it independently as well. It's there for you to learn. I want to come back to you, Esther, because you undertook this certification as a motivational coach. And so I just would like to ask you to describe what are the activities that a coach does, you know, what does a motivational coach do, and who benefits from a motivational coach?
Right, so the certificate I undertook and got certified in as a career coach, as my goal is to connect people with their passion, their purpose, and their values, right? The training was a unique one that was done online, right? It was done through physical checkbooks, online quizzes, and webinars, and other methods we used that provided the training. That virtual format was great for me because it was suitable for someone that was at home at the time. For me, trying to expand a new career while being employed. The cases I'm the coach and the client, that includes questioning. We do a bit of like feedback, observation, see what the person is all about, and certain techniques that the coach used to help the client explore issues that they want to talk about, things that they want clarity on, understanding together, and coming up with a sort of like an actionable outcome that they can implement to get to that goal that they're asking about. This type of coaching can be applied to anyone who's looking for help to work through their particular problem in life, or they need encouragement along the way. The motivational coach will work with you to get you clarity about your life's purpose and goals, encourage you for you to discover who you really are and believe that you are the expert in really what you do, you know, about your life, your work. We believe that you have the power within to actually excel to where you want to be.
All right. I want to come back, you know, one last thing to ask Matt, you know, obviously as the, you know, the HR person in the room. So as you're hiring, one, I wanted to ask you what you think are the important skills to build in this new environment, and outside of communication. But I also wanted to ask this, you know, to feed off of this idea of, you know, growth and motivation. Have you found at any part of from the work from home aspect of employees doing their job that there's just that there's a problem with that it's, you know, that there are some employees?
So Sonia, you broke up there a little bit. Oh. Can everybody else hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So Sonia, you broke up there a little bit for me, so I think I missed some of that. but let me try and answer, and you tell me if I missed anything. So,
Okay.
I think you were asking about what other skills. You also talked about motivation. So I think I mentioned actually early on about engagement, right? And part of engagement is that the motivation, right? Um, you have to be self-motivated. You have to be able to drive yourself. That's part of the acting autonomously too, right? If you're not able to go and find things and you're not self-motivated and self-driven, it's much harder to have somebody else driving you and engaging you and energizing you remotely. We've actually lost a couple of associates this year, because they really weren't that engaged remotely, right? You know, on the day that I called the associate and was preparing to let them go, she was walking on the street during hours she was supposed to be working. Like I could hear the cars in the background. And I said, "Where are you?" Because I can't reach you through, Teams, which is what we use for communication at work. And she said, "Oh, I'm doing this. I had to run this errand or whatever." Meanwhile, her manager had been looking for her and every day had similar, examples. So, really, I don't think she's a bad person. I think she couldn't figure out how to make it work for herself at home. And I think that is going to be such a critical skill for people to motivate yourselves and figure it out.
Yeah, and if
Go
I
ahead. I'm sorry.
No, just to your point, Matt, that self-drive and that motivation is exactly what got me to where I am today too. So even before you get into the office and you get a job, you have to have that motivation now as a student entering the workforce. Because if you don't have it now, you're not going to have it. You have to start before you even get your foot in the door with that self-drive and motivation, and that's what will eventually get you a job.
Yeah, I do agree. I do think that, I think the one interesting thing about the new workforce, I want to kind of recap a couple of takeaways is that this generation that is moving out, this class that is graduating is, very likely to never work 5 days a week. And, in an office in the typical way we've come to expect. And on the other side of that, if you're the type of individual that needs a lot of direction, it's going to be difficult. So it's it's more your swimming lessons will be by being thrown into the pool, and I gather with not as much else. And then I think the other thing that we can take away from this is that we should enhance our technical skills to make sure that we can communicate well with our coworkers, as well as to get our jobs done. So overall, I want to say, look, I really, I think you all did a great job in terms of, discussing, your experiences, and I'd like to open it up at this point to questions from the students. So, Stacy, I don't know, is there a student host? If I do encourage you to put questions into the chat box.
So far we have 2 questions.
All right.
I'll read the first one.
Okay.
How do you see working from home and the digitalization of the industry progressing over the next couple of years? My question is being addressed. The question was addressed already. So the only other question is, I've heard a lot of employees are threatening to leave their jobs should they not be offered flexible hybrid work from home structures. How are companies responding to that if they weren't intending on offering hybrid?
So I can take that. I have a lot of colleagues in the HR community that are in that situation, and really the bosses have kind of said, if you can't be in the office, then you don't have a job here. And it's from my perspective, I think that's a shame, right? You lose a lot of quality talent that way. But if that's the environment and the culture that they want to build in their organization, then, you know, I guess they have every right to do it the way that they want to do it, right? They're the boss. I would also say that unless there's some kind of medical accommodation situation, you know, New York, New Jersey, we are employment at will states, and they can, you know, exit somebody for whatever reason. So, you know, from my perspective, it's extremely disappointing for companies that are going to be doing things like that, but they can.
I guess what I'm going to ask this is that, does that, you know, in my mind, is, you know, I assume that you're saying you're already at a point where you're happy to hire people 100% remote. And, you know, and at the most right now you're looking at, you know, limited, you know, in-office engagement. Do you think that's going to be that companies that do that will have, you know, a greater, you know, draw on top talent? I think, you know, will that make a difference? That, you know, I mean, there are companies that have their own, you know, culture and their own draw. People want to work for them, but will they want to work for them if they have, you know, options like this? I guess that's my question to you, is that.
Yes. So definitely. And I would say that we've actually seen it in candidates that we've been interviewing. There are a number of candidates, you know, in this industry, right? There were so many companies that went back to the office 6 months ago. So there are just so many candidates who have been, you know, interviewing with us saying, our company doesn't care about us. They, you know, they're forcing us to take mass transportation to go to work every day, and they just don't feel safe and comfortable, and so they're looking elsewhere, which is good for us because we do have more flexibility. But it's a shame that companies are doing that to their people too.
All right. And I guess I could turn that question to Victoria. Now that you've completely worked remote, do you ever see yourself really wanting to go in 5 days a week? I mean, I know you want a different social life. And,
I think right now, maybe in the next 10 years, yeah. But when I have a family and kids, no. So again, I think it's very subject to your age and kind of where you see yourself and your life at this moment. You know, I would do anything to be back in New York and walking to work. I mean, that's like what excites me being a young person. But if I have a kid at home or a couple of kids, why would I want to go in the office then? I mean, I don't foresee that happening in the next few years, but I think it will change my opinion as time goes on and as I get older. But being young, I think having that in-person interaction, and even just like from a self-reflection point, I sit in my bathroom for half the day. And I feel like as someone who's young, I should be wanting to get up and get dressed and do my hair and do my makeup. I mean, I want that drive again that I sometimes feel like I'm lacking because no one even sees me during the day besides my mom, dad, and my dog. So I really do sit in my bathrobe and my pajamas and I do work. But I think even for a situation like that, being young, being young in itself gives you that motivation. When you're working at home, you kind of don't feel it as much. So like I said, I do foresee it changing maybe as time goes on and as my life changes. But for right now, I would love to be in office 5 days a week. But ask me that question in 5-10 years from now, probably wouldn't be the same.
Okay. Did you get another question?
Yes, there's 2 more questions. The next question is, Miss Murray mentioned knowing how to market yourself. The past year we've been online and our ability to gain experiences has been limited. What do you suggest highlighting if you have not had that experience?
Okay, so first of all, you know who you are. Start thinking about the things that you are familiar with at this point, what you know, build on your strengths. Start talking to people that you feel connected to, people that you probably look up to, you know, look at their lives, see what they have done. connect with people in your niche or in your area of specialty. If there's a particular skill that you need to learn for whatever avenue you're looking to go through, I suggest you start reading up on it. There are many things that are free. There's many things these days you can you can get for free that you can just investigate in. Connect with people, like-minded people like yourself. There's so many people are connecting these days just by making yourself available. Get involved in some volunteer, something that pertains to what you're actually trying to do. Volunteer for some free service, and don't beat upon yourself because you don't feel that you're there just yet, right? Just think of the things that make you happy. Start writing. Sometimes it just takes time for you to just write stuff that you, I'm sorry. Sometimes just take a moment to yourself and just think of, what are you good at? Make a list of things that you're good at and build on those, right? And you will start seeing things unfold. And when in doubt, reach out to somebody and just express yourself, because people are really there today to really willing to help you, to motivate you to get to that next level.
Thank you.
Next question. I have heard that employees are planning on quitting jobs if they have to stay remote. Why are companies not planning on returning to the office if employees would rather work in person? What do companies gain from having to fire employees that don't thrive in a work from home environment?
So should I take this?
Go ahead.
So, it's a little bit tough to answer because there are some companies that are, the thing that the company has to gain is that they can give back office space and save on the overhead of having an office, right? So a lot of companies are looking at doing that. Is that the perfect model? I don't know. I think some companies are going to try it moving forward. I think it depends on the role that you play in the organization, whether or not that actually works. I think in creative roles, often it's better to, be surrounded by people or to have at least have some level of interaction with people. We have a lot of, designers and graphic designers and things. And I think, while the graphic designers, they're really, in the computer all the time, the designers themselves and holding and touching the clothing, it's important, right? They need to be a little bit more in person. Our finance team has said, I don't think we ever need to go back to the office again. And some of them really don't want to. They're very happy to be at home and by themselves. They're likely much more introverted. So it's really tough for any company to have a one-size-fits-all solution. And I think it sounds like the point that you're making, having a one-size-fits-all, they're going to lose employees one way or another.
I think I actually think that is really a common problem for a lot of organizations, even institutionally. I think there's a pull. There are the people who don't want to come back at all. There are people who are like, if we don't come back, I can tell you that, as a professor, it's very, the remote style or the synchronous remote style of teaching is not as enjoyable as being in a live classroom. So I think that there's definitely, there's pulls in both directions. And I would hope that somewhere along the line we'll find the balance of, those of being ways to accommodate, both sides of that type of employee or what they'd like to do. Okay. Do we have any more?
A couple more, yep. It is so interesting seeing how companies are doing all three hybrid, in person and online. Do any of you see a world where we are all back fully in person or just a fully new way of work?
I can comment on that. I think that even if COVID didn't happen, I feel as though a lot of companies are looking for technology to place people. And I know that sounds horrible, but my mom is a vice president at Citibank, and she's been there for 40 years, and she's seen how they don't even need tellers anymore at the bank. Everything could be done through a computer. So I think with or without COVID, I think companies may have somehow went this route anyway. I think COVID just pushed it a lot sooner than maybe expected. But I don't know. I again, like I said, I do wish there's that hybrid or maybe fully back in person, but it just seems like the future really is working remotely.
I wish I can say the same for the city of New York, because it seems like it's not even a conversation that they're discussing today. And I know for a fact that there are many employees who are cringing going back into the office. You know, they started us off, like I said earlier, they started us getting back into the office this week, and half of the employees really have been spoiled by working remotely, and this seems to be like the new wave to the future for most of us. I mean, hybrid model, will it work for the city of New York? It all depends, because you see, our demand is revenue. So I think the concern is really not whether we're comfortable or not, but can we bring in more revenue at home, as opposed to being in an office where they can actually keep up with, keep up with the productivity, because that's basically the top priority for these city agencies, is the revenue demand that is really driving this, which is why I think the hybrid model might be, it probably will be a luxury for few based on their status. So I don't think the city may lean towards a hybrid. They may more lean towards an all office. But let's see what happens in the coming months or years. See what happens then. But it's not. I don't think they're heading in the hybrid model at this time. No, not for us at least.
I will say personally, if I have to keep attending virtual conferences, I'm going to stop going.
Yeah, and that's a fact, because we have a weekly meeting, and like you don't know what people are doing, so it really it has its pro and con as far as like, is it effective or not. Most of us feel that it's a waste of time, but we just go through.
Okay. Stacy, next question.
Great. I guess this is probably the best for Matt. Are companies and/or recruiters considering international students during their hiring process?
Oof, that's a good question. So, so based on conversations I've had with a lot of my HR colleagues, over the last year, so prior to 2021, I would say no, that there were very few. I think that that's starting to change again. I think companies are starting to open up to international students again. I think it had more to do with the immigration's restrictions that were in place in the prior administration versus anything having to do with international students. I used to work for Mars, and we had so many international hires. It was just something we did. We wanted the best talent, and we didn't care where it came from. And I think and hope that that's kind of the way the industry is going again.
Stacy, do we have any more?
Yep, we have 2 more right now. 3 more now. Do any of you have concerns for the lack of guidance occurring with WFH standards? Do you believe there should be more guidelines and training available for candidates that may deal with attention disorders or have more difficulty with self-starting?
I'm I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's a good question. You know, from for people that have attention issues, I think everybody works a little bit differently, right? I would say that I have attention issues and focus issues a lot of the time, and probably that's heightened working from home. Um, I think everybody has to figure out what works for them. So when I'm in the office, I like to keep my door open. I like all the noises and sounds of the office. Um, Unfortunately, my HR team sits in an area where the finance team is, and they're all very quiet, and that bothers me. I don't like quiet. I like noise. Um, it might sound like a strange thing to a lot of people, but I need noise to focus. So I'll even put in earbuds so that I have noise. Working from home, I don't have that noise just inherently around me, so I keep the TV on all day. I have no idea what's on that TV, 8 hours of the day, but it's on just as noise in the background, to help me focus. So, I think everybody has to figure out what works best for them. And yeah, and try and adjust and adapt. I think that there probably is an opportunity for more trainings on work habits from home, and what you can do to keep yourself focused and things. But yeah, I think there's definitely an opportunity for more trainings and things out there on that.
And if I can add something, I wouldn't be afraid to ask questions. I annoy my coworkers all day long. I don't know how to do this. Can you explain it to me? I mean, whether it's a text message, a Teams chat, a call, don't be afraid to ask. You are learning, and they understand that. They're taking on new people to train you. So I wouldn't be afraid to ask those questions, and whoever you need clarity on, ask. Whatever you have a question on, ask. I think asking questions only makes you look better at the end of the day anyway, because it shows you're paying attention, you want to learn, you have that drive and that motivation to do your job to the best of your ability. So I wouldn't be afraid to ask if you feel like there's something lacking in training. Just vocalize your voice, whether it's through the keyboard or over the phone. That would be my best advice too.
And if you don't do that, the outcome could be worse.
Right.
Right? You could have to do hours of rework, or somebody else could have to do the rework, and yeah, not good for anybody. Just I'm with you. Ask questions.
But I also think that you can add, like, if you're concerned about your attention span, how you're getting your work, how you be productive, set aside a place in your home. I do have a separate area from my home so I don't get distracted. So this is my workspace. I created this workspace. All that happens here is work. So the top of the day, I list out the things that I need to do that is top priority for management, because I have to write it down in case they interrupt me while I'm working, to stop what I'm doing to do a top priority issue. So my work is separate from everything else. So Matt, I agree. The television is on. I don't know what's happening over there, right? I'm at work. I'm at work here. And you know what? I do get dressed. I do wake up and I do prepare like I'm actually going into the office. So my mindset is already programmed for work. So that's sort of like, if you want to think about it that way, try it and see if it works. For anyone who's like experiencing this, like, oh my God, attention deficit, I cannot focus on my work. Maybe set aside that space that is just your work and see if it works. Just try it a day or two and see if it works. And then, if that works for you, then hey, great, you focus and then continue with your day.
Thank you. Stacy, do we have another question?
I actually want to agree with Miss Murray about that. I say get up like you're getting up for work, get dressed, don't stay in your pajamas because it'll make you more productive. I found that with myself, especially.
Yes, I ditto that. Even though I may not do it myself, take that advice.
Absolutely.
At least take a shower.
Yes,
At least once a day.
I do that. I really do that.
Okay, this question is for Matthew. For Mr. Prail, how is productivity measured in your company with the work from home structure? I believe you answered this already, but if you want to further.
Yeah, so I think productivity is measured differently by whatever function you're a part of. It could be how many styles you're producing if you're in design, or the number of CADs you get through in a day. It could be that stuff, um, I don't know that there's an exact answer to the productivity, but I would say, generally speaking, productivity is measured the same way at home as it is in the office.
I
It's,
can add a little to
oh,
this.
good.
I can add a little to this. So for those of you who don't know, I work with Golden Touch as well, and I probably pioneered the, couple of days a week employment, and so now everyone's found out the secret. But one of the ways that I can keep a visual on what my team is doing, aside from, early morning phone calls, I'm really, and this is for focus too. I find that like between 7 and 9, no one is going to call me. So it's really a good time to get up and work on, if I have targeted things to get done at that hour, and then my day can open up to other people. So that's number one. But as far as managing a team, I've always had automatic reports sent to me that kind of like, I know the functions that my team does. So I get a series of reports every day that tell me, how much of this particular activity occurred, of that, was there a processing of payments or whatever. So in that way, I don't have to be there to see them killing themselves to understand that there's really high volume or there's really low volume. And if the volume's low, then I can turn around and say, hey, you know what, your volume is low right now. We need to do X, Y, and Z. And we could address, kind of, housekeeping activities that we don't get to look at in high season. But by watching those patterns and getting that information, everything you do, we're working on the computer all the time. And even now, I mean, our Outlook tells us, you have quiet time now. You didn't answer, you had these messages in here. So we're even getting feedback now from the email system. But before that, the way to do it is to, kind of get these reports that give you an overview of what's going on, with inactivity, and you could see that. And you could see if someone's on their computer, and you can see the flow of work and how many things are getting done. So while for it may be, how many styles does a designer produce, it's how many, transactions is a payments coordinator taking care of? How many customs entries are being filed? How many shipments are going on water? Those are the types of things that we can do.
I can add to that as well, not from a managerial standpoint, but as an employee standpoint. My boss asks us to log what we do every hour. So if I'm working on a project from 10 a.m. to 12, I log it in our database. That way, not only can he see it, but as my team members. So I found that to be annoying at first, but it is really efficient in knowing what everybody's doing. Especially if I don't talk to my coworker, I can just see what history they logged. And also, I think Professor Chapman said on Microsoft Teams, you can see when somebody is there and when they're not, based on like a little clock that comes up next to their profile. So when somebody's sitting at their desk working, because it will be green, and you'll know when somebody's not there because it will be yellow. So it's kind of a funny way to see who's doing their work and who's not. But productivity is definitely measured even from working at home.
Yeah, that's for sure. I just want to add one more thing to the distraction. There is such a thing called a cell phone. Can you put it into like autopilot mode or something? Because that is like one major distraction. Everything that we do, no matter what it is, that cell phone keeps ringing while you're trying to. So I think, that cell phone is something we should think of as well, if possible.
True.
Right, a couple more. Do any of you have concerns for the lack of guidance occurring with work from home standards? Do you believe there should be more guidelines and training available for candidates that may deal with attention disorders or have more difficulty with self-starting?
Wait, you already asked that one.
Okay.
Okay, sorry.
Next one. How do you separate your work from your personal life working from home?
Oh, you don't.
You don't.
It's really, really tough
It
to
is
do.
difficult,
Yes.
but you make it work as long as you get your work done.
And it's actually it's a big conversation we've had in our organization. So, as we start to go back to the office, we're going to be in that hybrid that I described, and people are going to be in the office 2 days a week. What we're saying, starting when that happens, is that we want everybody in the organization to be available for meetings and things from 9:30 in the morning till 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You can flex your hours early, you can flex them later, whatever works for you, but those are the hours that we want to be scheduling meetings. We don't want to be scheduling meetings outside of those hours. Will everyone stick to it? Probably not, but we're trying to set some kind of guardrails to protect people's work-life balance. And it's, everyone has to kind of manage their own work-life balance too. I'm not the best example of it all the time, although I would say it's softball season. My daughter plays softball, and on the days that she has games, typically we don't end work at our company until 5:30. I have to sign off at 5, sometimes 4:45 to get to the game on time. So I do it. And that's how I protect my work-life balance. And it's different for everybody. I do start early in the morning. I'm definitely on by 7:30 every day, sometimes earlier. So yeah.
So that is true, Matt. It depends on the individual, and it's a trust issue too, because you're working remotely. No one is you're overlooking what you do, but at the same time, you of your own, you know what you were doing when you're in the office. So we trust you enough to know what you're supposed to do when you're at home, right?
Yep.
Sometimes it's easier said than done, because you figure that now you're at your leisure. So you you can put on your pajamas, you can come up, you sit at the desk, you're signing, you go out, you have a cup of coffee, you come back in, you do a task, then you go out again. So it's a trust. You have to trust your employees to do what they know that they paid to do, and at the end of the day, you will see the productivity. I believe it's a person's way of getting their work done, and they know what they're supposed to do. So I put trust in all of that ahead of all of that. I don't know, but for sure, you get up, you do what you're supposed to do as if you're in the office. You should be able to function the same way. And I do know being at home can have many distractions. You have kids sometimes are running around, so you need to maybe say you play with them later or so. It's kind of hard, but you have to make it work, because you have to do the job, and they have to understand they will get to you. You will get to them at some point, but when you say that to younger kids, it's kind of hard, right? If you're a parent with little toddlers around, it's kind of hard, but you have to figure that out.
Yeah. And what I would say is that I am like a solo show over here. I'm young, I'm single, I'm living with my parents. I separate my personal life with work by planning my weekends out. I know that might sound weird, because why are you planning every single weekend? But what you see on my calendar is pretty much my personal life. Because if you don't keep yourself busy personally outside of your house, no matter who you live with, that's when it gets a little frustrating. So I would definitely suggest go out, hang out, have fun, shut your computer off at 5 o'clock. That is most definitely what I do. And then I make plans every weekend, whether I'm with my friends, doing things with my parents. I always try to get out of the house. Even on my hour lunch break, I'm out of here. I'm like, bye guys, see you in an hour. I have to leave my house. I have to be out. I have to take a second for myself. And if you don't do that, it's ultimately going to affect your work. So my suggestion would be go out on the weekend, shut your computer off at 5, go out on your lunch hour, and be young and enjoy it. And still do your work. I'm not saying don't do your job, but I'm saying definitely take time for yourself.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know if we have any other questions, but I do want to make sure that Matt has time to discuss, I know you said you have some open positions, and
Yes.
so I do want to make sure that our attendees are aware about that. So if you want to put that out there, Matt. think you
Yeah,
could-
definitely. So if anyone's looking for an entry-level position, maybe even into the sales function, we have a sales assistant role open. If you have a little bit of experience in sales and you want to be a salesperson, we also have a junior sales executive role open. We have plenty of other additional roles open too. Graphic designers, designer roles. So if you're interested or you know anybody who's interested, feel free to send a resume. I don't know if you can see this, HR at gtmports.net. I don't know.
Okay,
So
we can definitely
send it out.
send that out.
Thank you.
We can definitely send that out. Okay, are there any more questions? I think we have 5 minutes or something.
One more I see. Do you ever imagine virtual reality being incorporated in the future of work as a hybrid model?
Oh, wow.
That's a tough one.
So virtual reality meaning, I guess, in what way? I know that, there are organizations that are using virtual reality for training programs right now. But I'm not sure that I understand the question. Was that the question?
Well, I guess my question would be, because I've seen it in the labs up at FIT, where you can have a virtual space. Like, will there be a virtual showroom? Will buyers walk through the virtual showroom versus coming to visit us?
We actually have set up a virtual showroom for some of our divisions.
Mhm.
So, and we actually do use 3D technology to design clothes and to do the fit sessions. So we have 3D fit models that we try the garments on once we have put in all the measurements and everything, and we adjust those garments based on what the fit looks like and how the 3D model moves in it. And we've actually started using that with Walmart and some of our other big customers. So it's something that they actually like too, because we can make all the adjustments, in real time, instead of having to, send out for a sample, wait for the sample to arrive, and, keep going back and forth like that.
Okay, Matt, can you put that address up one last time and I will put that in the chat box? I'll copy it.
I just chatted it in the chat box to all
I'll get
attendees, I think.
Okay.
Did I not do it right?
Also, does that pertain to international students, that job opening?
We are not considering international students at this time, unfortunately. Sorry.
All right, good. We'll put that in there. Okay. Okay. All righty then. What? Do you have another one?
That's all the questions that I have for you.
Okay, great. Well, we really are at time. We really just came up to 8 o'clock. So I just want to say thank you once again to Matt, Esther, and Victoria. Thank you so much for giving us your time doing one more virtual meeting. And, I'm sure that our students have benefited from your input, and as you all go out there to, make your way in the workforce, I hope that you'll digest all of this and it will help you along the way. So thank you all again. And Stacy, are we sending virtual certificates? Do we give virtual badges? We normally send our thank yous out in a certificate to our panelists, but I don't know if we're doing virtual badges this year. But in terms of that, but I thank you again, and I wish everyone a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Sure.
Okay.